Good morning and good afternoon. This is Monica Paolini from Senza Fili, and today we're talking about CBRS and the roles that CBRS and the 3.5 gigahertz band in the US have for the enterprise. And I have the honor to talk to Dave Wright, the president of the CBRS Alliance. Dave, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Monica. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of our thoughts with you.
Okay, so just to get started, to make sure everybody knows, what is that the CBRS Alliance is doing in this place? Can you tell us something?
Yeah, great question. CBRS Alliance, we're looking at essentially LTE and next generation cellular services in the CBRS band here in the US. So we came together approximately 2 years ago. We had 6 founding members who started the organization in August of 2016. And we have grown over the course of the last just over 2 years to 114 members. And again, our role is really looking at developing any technical specifications where there are gaps. We certainly don't want to recreate the wheel, but where there may be something that 3GPP hasn't touched on, or perhaps another industry organization, WinForum, which we work very closely with, then we would step in and we would develop, technical specifications around that. Another big focus for the Alliance is on interoperability. We want to create an ecosystem of equipment that all work seamlessly together. So if you kind of think about how the Wi-Fi industry has flourished, because clients and infrastructure devices are all certified by the Wi-Fi Alliance. In that case, we're looking to sort of recreate that same type of environment with CBRS. So we have a certification program, which is our OnGo certification and branding program. We're certainly doing a lot around evangelizing CBRS and making sure the market is aware of the opportunities. And then 2 of our other major activities are around the business cases and making sure that the different use cases and applications, that their requirements are being fed into our technical working group, which specifications development is going on. And then most recently, we started up what we call the deployment and operations working group. And they are looking specifically at some of the unique aspects to deploying a CBRS network in a private LTE or a neutral host type of an application. So at a high level, those are kind of primary activities of the Alliance. As I mentioned, we've got 114 members, and that really covers the gamut. That's everything from tier 1 mobile operators to the largest cable operators, chipset vendors, cellular infrastructure vendors, enterprise wireless LAN vendors, and a whole cast of others.
Now, yes, and you're doing a lot of stuff right now, and one of the latest things you've done is, as you mentioned, the branding of CBRS service as OnGo. Can you just briefly say, so that we know, moving forward in the interview, what is the difference? What's OnGo and what's CBRS?
Sure. So CBRS is really, it's not even a band. The band is technically, the 3.55 to 3.7 gigahertz band. CBRS is the framework. It's the spectrum access framework that the FCC has put in place with the 3-tiered sharing structure. We've got the incumbents, the priority access exclusive users, and then the general authorized permissive use. So that CBRS really describes that sharing structure, if you will, in the spectrum access paradigm that we're utilizing. OnGo is the brand that we're going to use for our interoperability. Again, the idea is that you would be able to purchase, RAN infrastructure equipment that was OnGo certified by the Alliance, and know that without a doubt is going to interoperate with the spectrum access system, which is the coordinator of the RF environment, and any other ancillary services like coexistence managers. So if those are OnGo certified, you'll know that your different components will work well, and you don't have to do your own interoperability testing. We're trying to bring, again, the simplicity of the Wi-Fi model and what we've seen in the Wi-Fi industry to cellular technologies, and I think that's really pertinent to the enterprise.
Absolutely, yeah, and clearly CBRS is more than the enterprise, but the enterprise is a big part of it. Now, let's just look at it from the point of view of the enterprise. clearly wireless is becoming more important. What's going on? What are the main trends, and how does CBRS fit in there?
Sure, good question. So I think that generally speaking, and I guess I wanted to start off by just saying enterprise is such a broad category, right? So we talk about the enterprise market, and really within the enterprise, there are all sorts of subclassifications, right? I mean, the employer Ruckus, we deal with this a lot on the Wi-Fi side, where enterprise can encompass everything from, large-scale public venues to Fortune 500, Fortune 5000, small, medium business, but then also, retail, and then specific vertical sectors such as, healthcare, hospitality, higher ed, K through 12. I mean, they all have slightly different, requirements and needs, but they're all, grouped within the enterprise classification. But, when I go to the, 100, 200,000 foot view of the enterprise, what are some of the main trends? I would say it's a well-established trend at this point. It's probably been going on for the last 2 or 3 years, which is, wireless first or wireless only offices. Many companies are really at the point now where they're just moving away entirely from the Cat 5, Cat 6 cabling to each, desk or cubicle. And they are relying on, wireless services for their employee communications within their offices. There's a lot of advantages to that. Obviously, it cuts down on the infrastructure and build out costs. They don't have to, put in as many switch ports for gigabit Ethernet type, wired connections, and it also allows a lot more flexibility within the workspace. So, if your voice and your data services are provided over a wireless connection, then, it's very conducive to open workspaces, shared workspaces, and it's really, the big trend. So I think, the all wireless workplace is that's kind of a given at this point in my mind.
Yeah, it is kind of a given, and everybody loves it. People just don't want to use wires. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's easy and there are no challenges there. So from a point of view of the enterprise, what are the challenges that they need to address to make sure that this becomes not just a reality, but that it meets the requirements that they have?
Sure. Great question. I guess just circling back to that real quickly, I mean, the fact that a lot of business users are now also relying on their mobile devices, whether that's personal owned devices or corporate supplied, mobile devices, the reality is most of those do not even have a wired Ethernet connection, right? So, ergo, you are going to use wireless to connect it. I think some of the challenges associated with the all wireless workplace is just spectrum availability, quite honestly. The 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz unlicensed bands, we are making great use of those for sure. But as 802.11 Wi-Fi technology advances, the way that we are going to get to gigabit Wi-Fi PHY rates is to go to wider channels, right? So the only way you can get to a gigabit PHY rate with Wi-Fi is to go to at least an 80 megahertz wide channel. And the reality is that if you look at the 5 gigahertz spectrum, especially if you're going to avoid the channels which require the DFS capabilities for radar detection, if you happen to be near an airport or you've had issues with lack of DFS support in the clients that you need in your enterprise, again, if you're avoiding DFS, you've really got 2 80 megahertz channels, one in one at the lower end of the band and one at the upper end of the band. And so, that's not a realistic deployment situation. You can't really cover a dense corporate campus with 2 channels. So I think that, that's one of the big challenges that people are facing. They're being constrained to using smaller channel sizes, maybe 20 megahertz channels, because of the spectrum availability. Clear spectrum availability in 5 gigahertz, and clear, I mean not DFS encumbered. So, that's where I think CBRS becomes a unique new opportunity. It's 150 megahertz of spectrum, or up to 150 megahertz of spectrum, that the IT manager and CIO can make advantage of, or take advantage of, I should say. And it's also, it's not subject to some of the vagaries that you have in fully unlicensed spectrum. You don't have to worry about people coming in and turning on hotspots on their smartphones, which, now start to potentially interfere with your nicely laid out channel plan within your enterprise or your hotel or your conference center. Think of a few situations where that's come up recently, or not recently, but a few years ago. So with CBRS, there are no mobile hotspots. Every CBSD, which are the CBRS small cells, have to be registered and in a fixed location. So the spectrum environment is much more predictable for that enterprise IT manager or CIO. And so it becomes very attractive for mission critical applications, anything that requires very high availability, low latency. We think CBRS, becomes a sort of quality layer that you can add in on top of your Wi-Fi. We certainly don't think Wi-Fi is going to be supplanted by CBRS, but we think CBRS is very complementary and adds a new capability, again, for the enterprise.
Yeah, and especially with the growth of IoT, so it's not just basic connectivity. There's a lot of applications that have different requirements: latency, security, reliability, you name it. Right. But at the same time, from an enterprise point of view, an enterprise that is typically used to use Wi-Fi, which is relatively easy, doesn't have to be. I mean, you can have different levels of complexity, but overall, it's just something that they own. It's local. They know, they have great experience because they've been using it for like 20 years. So can CBRS or OnGo provide the same level of simplicity? Because, we're talking about LTE, and LTE, it is more complex than Wi-Fi.
It is. Yeah, right. It's a great question, and the bottom line is yes. I think that we will have OnGo solutions for the enterprise that will, be very close in simplicity to Wi-Fi solutions. Now, I fully agree with your point that traditionally cellular technologies and even LTE, and I would say LTE is much more simplified than 3G, which was much more simplified than 2G. I mean, so as we move to more sort of data focused and IP focused technologies in the cellular realm that add some level of simplification. Yet, it's a fully different paradigm from what most enterprise IT managers are used to. I mean, they're not used to thinking about EPC services and components and what the function of an MME is or an HSS. So I think that the good news is within the CBRS Alliance, you've got you've got members who are very focused on the enterprise markets and have a lot of history in the enterprise markets. So if you look at our member list, they would include companies that are very well established, leading companies in enterprise and carrier Wi-Fi, and they're now bringing OnGo solutions to the market. So of course they have the needs and the requirements of that enterprise wireless LAN administrator in mind, and that's the kind of deployment paradigm, management paradigm that we're looking for. I say I'm kind of, wearing my ruckus hat there a little bit, but I think I'm speaking for other members of the Alliance as well. So the good news is that, there's been a parallel shift towards cloud management, right? Even on the Wi-Fi side, more and more of the management plane and the control plane is residing in the cloud. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of the LTE services, so the EPC services will be abstracted into the cloud. That's not to say that you couldn't have like a local breakout capability for data plane, because we think that's very important, that enterprise data shouldn't have to go up to the cloud or shouldn't have to go back to a mobile core before it comes back to the corporate data center. So there would be local breakout capabilities in most of the architectures that I have seen from the enterprise crowd, the enterprise OEMs, I guess I should say. But the simplicity from a management perspective will be there. So, again, I think a number of the vendors are looking at common cloud management platforms. So a single pane of glass would allow you to manage, your enterprise Wi-Fi assets and your enterprise OnGo assets. So yeah, it will, have the robustness and the reliability characteristics of LTE, but not the complexity that's been traditionally associated with it.
So from an enterprise point of view, you can have your private network. You don't have to have the massive core that a mobile operator needs to have because they have operated a large network. And so it's going to be pretty much very, very easy. You don't need to have any special core competency there to run a CBRS network in a way that you do if you have like a licensed small cell network.
Right. I mean, I do fully anticipate there'll be a range of, deployment models even within the enterprise. So, some very large, sophisticated enterprise, they may want the very granular control that having an on-site EPC, or an internal EPC, I'll call it, would afford them. So I'm, thinking of the, Fortune 20 type companies, large manufacturers, things like that. They may have, again, they may already have some private cellular, and so they could leverage that. But I think for the majority of the enterprise deployments, a cloud hosted type of a service is probably what they will end up implementing. I think it also goes well with the SaaS service model. So to operate within the CBRS band, you're going to need to have an arrangement, I guess I'll say, with a spectrum access system provider, right? And they're the ones that, your infrastructure will make requests of the SaaS and say, I'm at this location, I'm operating at the general authorized tier or the priority access tier. Here's the amount of spectrum I would like to use, and the SaaS will then look at the environment where you are and make a spectrum grant. So, where I was going with that is, if you've got an enterprise cloud management and control platform, then it becomes very easy just to back end that with the SaaS services as well. That's one more cloud system that, that is sort of sitting behind your enterprise CBRS infrastructure. So yeah, I think the cloud paradigm for CBRS management and control is something that will become quite popular.
Yes, and that's going to enable many new use cases. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that in terms of, okay, so as I said, there is so many enterprise, there's so many verticals, so many cases out there. What do you think they're sort of more interesting in terms of understanding how CBRS is going to pan out?
Some of the specific enterprise verticals that seem to be interested. Yeah, I mean, some of the ones that we would focus on would be, or not focus on, but highlight, I guess I should say. The hospitality industry has been extremely interested in the opportunities around CBRS. Many hoteliers are looking for a number of wireless solutions. So they're looking for things that can provide better internal communications for their staff. There's a big push within the hospitality industry actually to have sort of a panic button capability for staff. Unfortunately, it's I guess a big requirement there, as well as providing just better sort of IoT building management systems, and that could be everything from just the HVAC, the security cameras that monitor the building itself, to guest room experience type of devices. So things that would control the entertainment system, lighting, door locks. All of this is all going wireless. So and again, some of that is going to happen over Wi-Fi, some of it's going to happen over other short-range unlicensed IoT, specific air links. But CBRS is just another tool in the toolkit, I think, for the hotelier in terms of sort of the private LTE use cases, which I've tried to articulate there. They also certainly are looking at it to provide better communications capabilities for the guests in the property. So, it's a well-accepted fact now that, guests judge a hotel on the basis of the Wi-Fi experience in that hotel. What is not as often reported, but is just as important, is the, ability to make a voice call within the property. If you go to a property and you have an important business call or personal call to make, and you've got no reception within the facility, or if you're at a conference at a hotel and you've got no coverage in the facility, that's kind of a big no-no in terms of, return business for the property. So they're certainly looking also to provide just better cellular coverage for the tier one MNOs. And in the larger, properties, conference centers, they may, have used DAS systems in the past, but, the economics of DAS and the complexities around installing DAS, and then also the coordination requirements of working with each of the mobile operators to get their, spectrum deployed on the DAS. All of that, really means that only the largest properties are going to make sense for DAS systems. And there's a lot of smaller and medium-sized hotel properties where it just doesn't make economic sense. And we think CBRS is a perfect solution for those. And in time, just due to the economics, it'll probably just take over that market.
Absolutely. And that's very important because there is all this sort of not the very top, the biggest companies that are the ones that are sort of underserved, and they can benefit more for sort of more cells couple deployments with CBRS.
Absolutely. I mean, when we look at the market, obviously there've been other solutions to provide, in-building cellular. So DAS is one, and I think it's been pretty successful in very large venues, especially public venues with large footfall. So if you get a large number of people traveling or transiting through a facility that's over 200,000 square foot, then the economics may justify a DAS. But but when you push down a little bit, certainly into the Fortune 5,000 type properties, and then especially when you get into commercial business offices, multi-tenant dwelling units, DAS just doesn't make sense. And so CBRS is really, we think, key to opening up that market for building cellular.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what do you think about the healthcare market? Because that's also another area where, reliability, there's so many applications that could be run, and guests as well, I guess patients. What do you think about that?
It's sort of, when you asked what were the big trends, and I said all wireless office, and more it's the all wireless hospital, or not all wireless, but predominantly wireless. So it's amazing the number of different systems in your average hotel room, hospital room, which are now wirelessly connected, and not just the sort of, internet connectivity for patients and their visitors, but far more important systems, telemetry systems that are monitoring vital signs and things like that, are now wirelessly connected. Again, for all the reasons that it's good to be not tethered in an office, it's also not good to be tethered, in a hospital or in a hospital room. So I think that it's very clear that hospitals are looking for very predictable and reliable spectrum environments to service those needs. I mean, this isn't just mission critical; these are potentially life critical services that are being offered. So the opportunities to deploy an LTE, a highly reliable wireless technology in a highly predictable spectrum environment such as CBRS offers, that's very compelling to a health system CIO.
Absolutely. No, as I said, there's not an amenity there. So let's go back and talk about the models. We talk about private networks and neutral hosts. So with CBRS, an enterprise has the choice of having either a private network, their own, and run their own show, or use a neutral host or work with an operator. How do you see the two going in terms of opportunities?
Sure. I would say, I think the shorter term opportunity for an enterprise is more on the private side. The internal communications, they know their needs quite well. That's probably what's more pressing in their mind. CBRS, again, as we talked about earlier, offers that sort of, predictable and reliable spectrum environment using an LTE technology. So, and it provides 150 megahertz of spectrum that they don't have access to today. So I think that private LTE for internal enterprise type communications, IoT services, building monitoring, mission critical apps, all of those things will probably lead. And the nice part of that also is, there's a good assortment of client devices coming to market that will support those types of use cases. So everything from, MiFis to USB dongles to enable sort of enterprise type traditional connectivity in the short term. And then, I think the longer term opportunity around neutral host is amazing. So, we have been talking about providing better in-building cellular coverage for a long time, and people have thought that, different technologies and different technologies and solutions were supposed to unlock this market, over, I would say, the last decade or so, and none of them have quite played out. And I think what has really been the obstacle to that in my mind is the spectrum access, and the fact that the enterprise wasn't free to deploy an infrastructure that they could use for their own internal communications needs on spectrum that they could access directly, and then also open that same solution up to the mobile operator subscribers within their property. CBRS enables that. So in my mind, CBRS becomes the sort of nirvana that we've all been talking about for a long time, but it actually enables it now. Instead of having to deploy, separate infrastructure for each operator that relies upon their licensed spectrum, I can deploy a common infrastructure that, if a mobile operator subscriber comes in and they've got a band 48 handset, band 48 is the CBRS 3GPP band, then it can attach to, my enterprise network. It can see that I support neutral host services. It can query to find out which home operators are supported. And then it can go ahead and attach and be authenticated back to its home operator and see that it's getting value from that home operator subscription, has a great quality service. I think the mobile operators are going to be more comfortable with this model than with inter-radio access technology or inter-RAT models, because this is an LTE bearer, so we can feed them all the native KPIs, and they can monitor the SLAs in a way that's very familiar to them in their roaming relationships. So yeah, I think it's a really compelling use case around neutral host. We think that as we talk about 5G and the next generation of wireless, it presupposes, very dense networks of small cells, and it presupposes in-building coverage. And we think that, frankly, it's pretty apparent that the traditional solutions have not really unlocked the in-building market. And we think that, CBRS and the technology solutions we're developing for it with OnGo really will unlock that. So we think it's setting the stage very nicely for the future of wireless.
Yes, absolutely. So, and I think that sort of like concludes on a good note in terms of CBRS. It's not only available right now, we're getting ready, but it's also preparing and expand the possibilities for in-building 5G moving forward, right?
I think so. I mean, as I go around and I talk to, in my ruckus capacity, working on regulatory, I talk to a lot of regulators around the world. And, with 5G, there's a big focus on enterprise and industrial. And again, it sort of presupposes the in-building presence. So I think that, the work that we are doing is going to really be quite valuable in the future, whether it's sharing models like we're doing with CBRS or other spectrum access models that would enable the enterprise or the industrial players. A lot of the capabilities, again, the neutral host technologies and specifications that we've developed really are sort of applicable regardless of what the spectrum access paradigm is. So we think a lot of this work is going to pay a lot of dividends going forward.
Excellent. Well, Dave, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you, Monica. It was a pleasure.
Same here. And thanks for all of you to listening. This is a conversation on CBRS and its role in the enterprise. Thank you very much. Bye.